Hey there, CJ Math students, and welcome to Notes 3.6 Part 2. So I found some interesting information on the web. I was looking through ESPN, and I read an article about how they create Madden player rankings. And they gave you this cool little graph here, and you could say how far you actually throw the ball right here, right? So I can move this back and forth, and then it would tell you what your Madden rating would be here. So it's saying if I can throw it 55 yards, my Madden rating for throw power would be 80. Just like here, if I can jump 28 inches high, my Madden rating would be 75 for my vertical. And so we're going to assume something. We're going to assume that how far you can throw something is proportional to your Madden rating. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that's how this works, but we're going to assume it's kind of close. So it says Mr. Mason can throw a football 55 yards. Therefore, according to this Madden rating system, he will have a throw power rating of 80. What would Mr. Mason's rating be if he could throw the ball 60 yards? I want you to round to the nearest whole number. So again, what are we comparing? We're comparing how far Mr. Mason can actually throw the ball. And yes, I can, in my prime, I could throw it 55 yards. I don't know about the day. And we're comparing his Madden rating. All right. So if I set up my ratio, initially I can actually throw it 55 yards and I get a rating of 80, right? And now I'm asking myself, well, what happens if I threw it 60 yards? So should that go on top or bottom? Well, if I could actually throw it 60 yards, that goes on top. And the variable that I need to figure out is x, right? What would my Madden rating be? Now I could also write this as 55 over 60 equals 80 over x. Or I could write this as 80 over 55 equals x over 60, right? There's a whole bunch of different ways I could write this, right? But let's stick with this way. So let's do some multiplication. We do our 80 times 60, and we do our 55 times our variable x, right? So that gives us 55x equals 4,800. And then to solve, we will divide both sides by 55. Those cancel out, so I get x is equal to, now if I do 4,800 divided by 55 on a calculator, we get 87.27 repeated, right? So if I'm rounding to my nearest whole number, sorry, that looks like an 82, should we say 87? If I'm rounding to my nearest whole number, 2 tells me to round down, so my Madden rating would be 87. Not bad, if I could throw the ball 60 yards, right? Let's go on to the next one. So jumping. In Mr. Mason's prime, he had a vertical of 28 inches. He had hops. According to the rating system, this would have only given him a jump rating of 75. So these professional athletes are ridiculously athletic, right? If Mr. Mason wanted to have a jump rating of 90, what would his actual vertical have to be? So I'm saying my actual vertical, and I'm saying that's proportional to my Madden rating. And so I'm saying in my prime it was 28, and my Madden rating would be 75, so equal to, now let's ask ourselves, if I wanted my rating to be 90, the rating's on the bottom, so that's 90 here, what would my actual have to be? X right there, right? So let's go ahead and cross multiply 28 times 90, 75 times x. So I get 75x equals 2,520. Doing the multiplication for you. You want to divide by 75 on both sides. And these cancel out. So I'm left with x is equal to, and again, you want to round to the nearest whole number. And I get 33.6. So if I'm rounding to the nearest whole number, this 6 tells me to round up. So I get x is equal to 34 inches. That is some major hops. So if I wanted my vertical rating on Madden to be a 90, I would have to actually jump 6 more inches, a whole nother half a foot, and 34 inches, right? So far, my Madden player initially has got a throw power of 80 and a jump rating of 75. So he's a pretty run-of-the-mill guy. And I think those are even probably generous. Now, let's see if this actually holds up. All right, so let's look at Cam Newton. Cam Newton has a throw power rating of 97. So if you look at my original rating and throw power, how far should he be able to throw the ball? So let's think about it. My original rating, if you go back to the first page, was 55 over 80, right? I could actually throw 55, and I got a rating of 80. So Mr. Mason, it was 55 over 80. So now Cam Newton, we don't know how far he can actually throw the ball, but we know he has a rating of 97. So let's go ahead and cross multiply. 80 times x is 80x, equal to 55 times 97. That's 5,335, right? So then we want to divide both sides by 80. And these cancel off, so I get x is equal to 66 point, we'll call it 68, right? So if I want to round that up to the nearest whole number, that 6 tells me to round up, so it's 67 yards. All right, so that means Cam Newton can throw the ball 67 yards. Now, wait a second. How far could Mr. Mason actually throw the ball? It was 55 yards, right? And how far can Cam Newton throw? That's 67 yards. So you're telling me Cam Newton, who was a 97, and Mr. Mason, who was an 80, Cam Newton can only throw the ball 12 yards further than Mr. Mason? That seems kind of absurd, guys. And you're right, it is. So is this rating system accurate? The answer to that is no. And probably because it's not actually proportional. And so what we were using was proportions to figure out these ratings. It's probably not actually proportional. There's probably some other math that goes into it. So therefore, the rating, the math that we've done is probably not accurate because, guys, Cam Newton can throw the ball way further than Mr. Mason. Right? That's the end of part 2.